An anonymous philosopher once said, "Woe is unto he who seeks the path of vengeance, for he has traded in love for purpose." A sad conundrum seen mirrored in a lost, frustrated, and aimless little boy. One that has decided to sacrifice his future to avenge his father in a fair fight against a ruthless barbarian that mercilessly took it.
I'm gonna kill you for that! I'll be the last thing you see! I'll kill you, do you hear me? I'm gonna kill you!
The cycle of revenge is often told in stories to show the extreme side of human nature, the dangers of letting oneself get caught up in emotional responses, and the consequence of seeing others as a means to an end, especially if it's another's life. It takes the world's most known rule, the golden rule, to treat others the way you want to be treated, and corrupts it into a feral response. If you hurt me, I hurt you. A retort that goes back as far as humans existed. It even shows up in early literature, like Shakespeare and Thomas Kyd. In addition to that, the religious text of the Christian Bible as well. Many animals tend to hold a grudge, with the story of an individual leaving his camel out in the hot sun all day, only for him to eventually come back and be beheaded by the creature. One tiger in the frozen wilderness of Russia tracked down a poacher that shot it. It waited outside its cabin, and once his target was defenseless, it ambushed and killed the attacker. Well, today we'd like to think that we're above barbarism, seeing the bigger picture and are able to come to conclusions that the cycle of violence comes to an end eventually. It's arguably no better. Nuclear weapons, current raging wars, and that bitch Veronica that thinks she's all of that reopens this obvious facade. While tribalism keeps us contained and happy, it can also make us bitter and malcontent with anyone who opposes our ideologies. Needless to say, the cycle of revenge and hatred spreads on a very wide, varying scale, blurring its influence the lower it is, and masking the absurdity on the higher levels. Thorfinn is a person blinded by rage, seeing nothing but his eventual goal of killing Askeladd. Throughout his journey, he has found killing, hostile or innocent, for the right of his objective. He's sacrificing his own well-being and pushing away his friends and family in pursuit of retribution. He was taught at a very young age by his village of the importance of being a warrior and fighting with honor. Sacrificing his life on the battlefield would be the highest form of respected death, and even dying without a weapon is frowned upon. The Viking philosophy was to fight good, eat good, and live good at any expense. A life that clashed with the teachings of a very caring and loving father that instilled kindness and forgiveness, even if Thorfinn was too young to understand it.
Remember, you don't have a single enemy. No one does. I promise you, son.
The eventual aimlessness that he ends up attaining after losing that purpose, that hatred in his heart, seems to be an obvious outcome of a man who has given his existence to mankind's darkest remnant. A goal of revenge so far down the scale of civilized that the lack of completing it has caused a fleeting soul to emerge in the husk of the human remaining. He no longer sees himself as a warrior, no longer cares for the life he once lived, nor for his life in general. Typically, when in times of turmoil and uncertainty, a lack of destination is called upon by religion. Throughout the show, especially in Season 1, religion and philosophy guided a person in one way or another, be it to kill and pillage to have a good afterlife in Valhalla, or to be a good person and rest yourself in the hands of a higher power as bad things are happening in order to live in such a world. But one man was shown to reject these coping mechanisms to exist in this world filled with a cycle of violence. Prince Canute, near his breaking point, frustrated with the senseless lives that they were living, decides to take a stronger will, choosing to break from the cycle and forge his own path. By rejecting both ways of living, he sees through pacifism and indifference, as well as seeing through those wanting to fight just to keep the fight alive.
Almighty, I no longer seek your salvation. If you refuse to give it to us, we will make our own, a paradise on this earth, shaped by our own hands.
To create a world that isn't perpetuating what they already see, but one that he feels is right. Thorfinn, too, pushed to the point where the world makes no sense, realizes that continuing the fight is pointless. Thus, continuing to live is pointless. Pain is impossible to feel when time has stood still. It is through reconciling his past instead of ignoring, carrying every burden of every action he has taken, evil or slothful, that he regains a foot in this world, wishing to carry on. To take a life is easy, destroyed as well as never able to reclaim or undo. But to create a life, to protect, to nurture is another thing entirely. Working on a farm and cultivating has given Thorfinn a chance to see past all he's done, so he can focus on growing. Each day, little by little, he has started to break down the barrier of who he is and what he's done, thus subsequently what he prefers in the world that he's been thrusted into. He's been given the strength to take the hundreds of lives he's taken, but was able to channel that into something objectively positive in creating the farmland with food. He's able to defend the inhabitants from unfair justice against it, using the strength to protect and give two slaves a better life, even if for just a moment. The ability to act upon it is one thing, but to see it is another, especially when entrenched so far on the other side. The ability to stand one's ground when faced with the easy option of fighting and using brute force worked so well in the past. It's an enigma. Once the king's men come to the farm and threaten everyone on it, friend or foe to Thorfinn, it is the philosophy of attempting to protect and show compassion with the power he's obtained that sways the mind of so many that value the very thing your protagonist now rejects.
We just met, and we've hardly even spoken. I don't have one enemy among these men. I have no enemies at all.
It makes no sense. Not to those who have the power to change, nor to those too weak to stand in the way of tyrants spilling blood until the last drop falls. Those with the ability to stop the cycle of endless violence hardly ever do so. But the threads of change often happen when one who has the ability to understand can band together with many who can combat ignorance, not people.